I feel nervous, yet the anticipation numbs my fear. From the very start of this fiasco, I've been a stubborn target, and today I can hopefully put an end to this dangerous con artist and get the answers we need, even though the small cafe isn't nearly as crowded as I had hoped for it to be, and is clearing out at a significant pace. I still don't think whoever turns up will risk anything shady or threatening. I've positioned myself with a clear view of the entrance and my back to the wall just in case, poised to act accordingly with whoever steps through the door. It's a defensive tactic that I can only hope keeps me safe if this meetup goes sour. Undeterred by the harrowing encounter I've come to face, the general atmosphere remains idyllic. The sun is setting and washing the clear horizon in a bright orange to red glow, perhaps offering the infamous calm before a storm.
Can I get you anything else?
The tired young waiter draws my attention. He appears as an angsty teenager around the same age as my son, but the dark circles underlining his eyes speak of a life already burdened by adult hardships. I shake my head without a word, taking into consideration that if she's near, then she would likely recognize my voice. The waiter scatters off, and I idly stir the wooden spoon in my ice-cold coffee. It's getting late, and those who came in after me have already left in droves. This is probably why the waiter tended to me for the second time in less than 5 minutes. Closing time is approaching swiftly, and I might have to leave if the crowd dispersed too much, because that would leave me vulnerable. I'm starting to think that she might not show up, though I don't want to make any assumptions. This woman has evaded every ploy we could devise. She has expertly hidden herself behind multiple layers of digital faces, and every single time we thought we made a breakthrough, it would turn out to be just another mask underneath a mask, albeit not this time. I'm fairly certain that we have her cornered. I'm sure she's led by the false promise of devotion, by the manner in which I've conducted myself and portrayed easy prey. Little does she know that the tides have turned, or so I can only hope. Everyone has been catfished at one point or another, though I doubt many have been swindled as brutally as my friend, Clayton. He was the perfect fool, a vulnerable individual, and yet sometimes I believe he got caught in a trap that wasn't initially meant for him specifically, all due to the fact that it happened to me first. It started off like any scam. I opened up my Instagram feed one day to a notification of a DM. It was the type we've probably all seen before. A very attractive woman on a clearly fake account, asking if I'd like to get to know her better, and attached to her message was a link. I don't know why my common sense decided to malfunction at that particular moment, but I pressed my finger on the blue highlighted text. My phone completely froze, and an internet tab immediately opened, though it wasn't even in a browser window. A gray chat box overlaid on my home screen, and a new automated message soon followed. It read, "Thank you for joining us. With your designated companion, you'll never feel the sting of loneliness again." At that point, I was tapping away at everything on my screen in a desperate attempt to close the intrusive link. I never quite got the hang of new technology, and as a last resort, I held down my power button just as a picture of the woman from Instagram popped up. There was an introduction paragraph that I couldn't fully read before the device ultimately shut down. After my phone rebooted, it seemed I had dodged a virus, and everything was soon forgotten. Though, odd things later indicated that something corrupt was already embedded in my personal files. There was an instance where I was running on a treadmill at the gym. My AirPods were connected to my phone and offered loud songs to drown out my labored breathing. I always found it much easier to push myself if I couldn't hear my own body grow tired. My steadfast pace was broken when the music abruptly cut off and a low melody, entwined with a gentle voice, spontaneously replaced the heavy rock I had been listening to. The interruption made me slow down to a jog and wipe sweat from my forehead with a nearby towel. I turned the face of my phone over, only to be greeted with a black screen and a warning that my battery had died. Such a minute occurrence was easy to brush off, but I could see the relevance in every small glitch thereafter. The same theme song with the haunting voice would come up from time to time, whether in the background of a YouTube video or echoing in the beeping of my alarm going off each morning. The eerie song stalked me through my phone, yet I could never place its origin, and I couldn't shake the underlying feeling of being watched. I suppose there was truth in the scummy virus. I couldn't enjoy a moment of loneliness anymore. Sometimes the great chat window would also blatantly reopen with messages from the woman who called herself Ari. The texts were always seductive in nature and clearly written by some sort of artificial intelligence. Like a fool, I simply clicked off every tab and left the problem to fester. I accept full blame. Life just got busy, and I delayed necessary precautions until it was too late. Too late was when Ari sent a message containing my home address, and even then, I didn't react accordingly. Along with the breach in personal info, she was asking to come over. That was the first time she deviated from sending vague and flirtatious texts. The message was obviously alarming, yet I didn't fully grasp the severity of such a problem. I mean, Facebook records our real-life conversations, right? Doesn't Google also store all our personal billing information on the accessible web? To a self-proclaimed old-timer, this was just another method used by advanced technologies to prompt engagement. When that particular message came through, I had just arrived at work and was having a coffee with my friend and coworker, Clayton. He saw the message and gave me a side-eye before snickering.
Back in the dating scene?
After 2 years of being divorced and nearing my 40s, the prospect of any kind of relationship was non-existent. I felt ashamed for my lack of trying, and having Clayton actually believe that I was speaking to someone gave me a little boost in confidence. So I evaded the truth and simply pulled my phone away with a smile.
I'm talking to someone as well,
Clayton shared, and I shot him a confused glance. He had been in a relationship for the past 5 years, so I didn't know what he could have meant by that. When he picked up on my hesitancy, Clayton sighed, a deep exhale that carried an odd mixture of defeat and resolution.
Kathy doesn't know, and she doesn't need to know yet.
A decade's worth of increasing admiration immediately declined by his words. Clayton wasn't the type to cheat, so this new woman in his life must have been something extremely special.
That's not the way to go about it, Clay. You know I speak from experience.
I didn't want to lay the whole speech on him again. He was there and saw what my wife's affair did to our family. It left me a single dad to my son, Henry, and nothing has felt normal ever since. The more I thought about it, the more ridiculous it sounded. It wasn't in Clayton's character to be unfaithful, nor was it like him to disregard my feelings from a past that he was well aware of. The only reason I stifled my anger was because I was utterly taken aback.
I met her online, and she actually reached out to me first. I suppose that's how people connect these days, or even reconnect.
Completely ignorant of my disgust, he continued speaking as though I inquired about his stupid mistake. My blood was boiling as Clayton confided in me some more. I wanted to tell him that I had no interest in hearing about all this bull, and that in fact, I might just go rat him out to Kathy. She deserved way better. Then his story began to sound a bit too familiar.
She messaged me on Facebook, and then we started talking through a personal messenger. Look, I didn't even know I had this app installed.
Clayton quickly flashed me his phone, and I saw the same gray text box overlapping his screen. I was by no means pragmatic to a fault, but I had no idea Clayton was that impressionable.
That's not a real woman,
I stated plainly, and refrained from calling him a idiot. Clayton blinked in confusion and veered his eyes between me and the phone screen.
That's an AI chatbot. They're a scam. I've got one pestering me too.
I pulled out my phone and then paused, realizing that I didn't have any idea how to actually open the chat window. It always popped up at random intervals, and it spitefully remained absent as I tried to prove my case to Clayton. After staring at my screen for an awkward stretch of time, I eventually gave up. We had to get to work, so I told Clayton not to entertain the robotic scammer any longer before I left him in the break room. That was the last time I ever spoke to Clayton again. When I got home that same day, Ari sent me a message. It deviated from her usual dialogue again, but this time it was very direct. "You can't tell anyone about me. We are not all the same." I immediately realized that she must have been referring to my earlier conversation, which only confirmed that the app was eavesdropping on our every move and that Clayton was indeed dealing with the same virus. The weeks following that incident, I began shutting off my phone completely when not in use, only for it to turn itself back on repeatedly. I also avoided Clayton at work, even though the moron was talking to a bot. I was very disappointed in the fact that he would so easily betray his girlfriend's trust. As for my own bot, Ari's messages only grew increasingly stranger. At random times of the day, she would send short texts that read, "Help me," and it eventually pushed me into writing a response. I kept it short, simply asking why she needed help or what she meant by the request, only for her to return to her robotic phrases and not address my question nor her prior plea. I finally got fed up with the harassment and made my way up to Henry's room one night, assuming that a tech-savvy 16-year-old would be able to help me better with purging the malware from my phone.
"You opened the dodgy link?"
Henry sighed when I relayed my problem to him. He was busy on his desktop while I stood in the doorway like a nervous child reporting to his parents that he had done something he shouldn't have. The role switch was comical, until Henry got up and showed me his own phone screen. The gray text window on his phone had a picture of Clayton and an array of text messages spamming the same words over and over. Test, test, test. At first I was fuming over Clayton pestering my kid, but then Henry quickly explained that it wasn't my friend at all. Apparently, the chatbot was emulating familiar faces to gauge a reaction. While I was mortified, Henry seemed intrigued.
"I haven't figured out exactly how it works, but people are falling for it. Just like you did, Dad."
He returned to his desktop and pulled up a screen consisting of colorful codes.
"Uncle Clayton fell for it too. Look."
With a few strokes of his mouse and a couple of taps on his keyboard, Henry opened something he referred to as a mock-up of Clayton's phone. It was his exact wallpaper and screen. Overlaid was the gray chat box seemingly flowing with real-time discussion. It felt intrusive and highly inappropriate for Henry to be stalking Clayton's personal device. Regardless, my interest piqued. I didn't focus on the conversation appearing on screen, but what drew my attention instead was the picture of the person Clayton was interacting with. It was my ex-wife.
"That bastard!"
I muttered under my breath and caught Henry staring at me from the corner of my eye. It forced me to compose myself.
"Okay, but this is all fake, right?"
I eventually asked him, tossing my phone on his desk and gesturing to it with a shrug.
"This Ari lady, she's not real. She's not anyone I recognize." "What?"
For the first time during our conversation, Henry didn't seem amused anymore. He began working on his computer, searching through files and more vibrant letters.
"I didn't attach anyone to yours. Your specific link was only meant to crash your..."
Henry trailed off, stopping himself mid-sentence. I could feel the air grow thicker with the affirmation. Anger flooded every fiber of my being.
"You're not trying to figure this out. You're the one doing all of this."
Henry went silent, which only provoked me even more. I clearly failed in the single-parent department.
"Shut this down. Don't play with people like that. What is this even meant to achieve?"
Testing my patience, Henry still didn't speak a word. He stood up and gestured to the door. Only once we stepped out of his room, away from the devices on his desk, he spoke up.
"I can't shut it down, and I don't know. I accepted this job on a dark web forum, and I'm only working in the roles section. I'm restricted from further access, and I'm still trying to figure it all out." "What does that mean? You just picked the victims?"
I couldn't hide my disappointment.
"Well, yeah. I choose unknowing participants and assign them to a familiar profile. Nothing more. That's all I know. I don't know what the gathered data is for, or how they use it. I don't even know who they are. That's kind of the point of it being through the dark web."
Henry watched me, awaiting a reaction. Sensing that I was a little lost on the explanation, he elaborated again.
"From what I understand, Clayton's test was based around loyalty. He broke that by entertaining a relationship. Not only by cheating on his girlfriend, but also by doing so with his best friend's ex-wife. And what's my test supposed to be?
I was getting impatient.
Dad, I don't know. I assigned you a blank profile. It was only meant to glitch your phone a few times. Maybe the song is meant to annoy you, like a test of mental strength.
The excessive texts from Ari pleading for help, the dreadful song that played to no end, even with my phone turned off. It stretched far beyond a few glitches. This thing was driving me mad. However, I didn't want to discuss it with Henry anymore. He clearly wasn't aware of what he had done. I stormed out of his room and decided to drive to Clayton's. I felt embarrassed and didn't want to explain all of this to him over a call through my virus-infected mobile. As clueless as I was regarding technology, I knew the dark web was a dangerous place to delve in, and I had no idea what made my otherwise bright teenager decide that it would be smart to sign us up for tests that he clearly didn't know anything about. The drive to Clayton's house was short, and upon my arrival, my heart sank. Parked along his street and encircling his home were police cars. Kathy stood on the porch, mute and inconsolable. For 2 excruciating hours, I accompanied the search parties through the surrounding area. Clayton's car was in the driveway, all his belongings left on the kitchen table, yet he was nowhere to be found. When it got dark, and Kathy still wouldn't speak a word to us, one cop noted that I was probably Clayton's closest friend present. He pulled me to the side and shared some evidence they found on his phone. He told me the basics of what they discovered. Clayton's phone was allegedly frozen on a text from an anonymous person announcing their arrival at his house. Across the message was a digital red stamp that spelled out the word, failed. Clayton remained missing for 3 somber days, and I was lost on what to do. If I gave up any information to authorities, then all of this might have led back to my son. Although he was foolishly dabbling in troublesome business, I did not want to get him into any trouble with the law. I knew he wouldn't have signed us up for the elusive test if he knew the outcome would be dire. Without anyone to turn to, I decided to start speaking to Ari. She was tedious company, though I would have expected nothing less from an engineered bot imitating a human. Sometimes she'd allude to things in an obvious call for help, but I couldn't really decipher it without additional information, which she was never willing to give. Over the course of a few days, I played into her obvious schemes and impassively responded to her advances. I needed any information I could get. While I spoke to her, Henry analyzed our conversations and somehow came to the conclusion that Ari was the same chatbot behind every profile, even the one Clayton spoke to. Furthermore, Henry explained that Ari likely wasn't being operated by anybody. He compared her to a digital siren scouting the internet like a real siren scoured the ocean, looking for victims to lure and devour. All of this was hypothetical, of course. The song that sporadically played definitely suited the notion of a siren. We couldn't assess what Ari was trying to acquire from her victims, but the people behind the project were clearly responsible for Clayton's disappearance. So, we tried numerous methods of ridding my phone of the virus. Firstly, we ran the best antivirus software we could acquire on the web in hopes of purging the app from my device, though that soon proved to be a fruitless endeavor. Henry then tried a full factory reset of my phone in an attempt to get rid of the program and all of its possible hiding spaces. Yet again, to no avail. I even purchased an entirely new phone, only for Ari to assume her hassle on my brand new device. With no escape in sight, we settled on retaliation instead, opting to try and get the scammers to expose themselves and reveal what truly happened to Clayton. Henry set up his programs to try and analyze the app and asked the bot to FaceTime him. But when the imposter finally connected to a call, it crashed and the phone rebooted automatically. It soon became apparent that an in-person meetup would be the only way to end this ruse. It didn't take long for Ari to eventually suggest that meetup. Since this was how Clayton's test concluded, I agreed to meet in a public setting. I was desperate for it all to end and for any trace of my friend to be unveiled. We planned to put an end to this as a duo, with Henry recording the audio of the encounter from a safe distance. Part of me knew that stepping into something like this blindly would be downright stupid, involving my kid even more so, even though he initially brought this problem into our lives. But I needed answers.
We're about to close.
The young waiter hesitates before approaching my table again, seemingly ashamed of his request. I can't help but sigh deeply, not because he's indirectly asking me to leave, but because Ari had still not shown up. I suppose I should have expected her not to. I grab my bag and make sure to tip the waiter generously before stepping out into the crisp night air. With the sun completely lowered, there's a slight breeze outside. I bask in the fresh gust of wind for a moment, considering my next course of action. I suppose I should probably return to Henry. He's still stowed away in the parking lot across the street. Then, suddenly, my attention averts to a figure standing 2 blocks down. Beneath the flickering lamppost, her features are shrouded and indistinct, though I immediately know that it's her. I had no expectations for her to even be a woman. I was anticipating the arrival of gang members, or a shady-looking loner guy at the very least. Nonetheless, Ari appears to be real. With the realization, a soft melody reaches my ears. The same mystic song that has plagued my phone is superficially sounding from the heavens and surrounding me in a gentle, otherworldly embrace. It's surreal to hear it so intensely. I have to send Henry the signal text, but I feel oddly drawn in the music. My feet involuntarily begin to move down the sidewalk, carrying me towards her. There's no logical explanation for the magnetic pull I evidently feel, and yet there's no way I'm about to believe in mythical creatures adapting to more modern methods. I can't think straight. I only know that I need to get to her. Ari remains unmoved, stalking me from beneath the shade of an apartment block. She's wearing a hood over her head, giving off a malevolent aura, but not even that deters my pursuit. If I'm being completely honest, her presence is unnerving and alluring at the same time. The closer I get, the further away I feel from reality. It's a weird and intoxicating thrill. Then, when I'm only a few feet away from approaching her, Ari ducks into the dark alleyway. It gives me a moment to consider my surroundings. There's cars passing by often enough. Surely the possibility of getting jumped wouldn't be likely in clear view of a semi-busy road. Or perhaps all senses have now deserted me. The song doesn't waver. In fact, it grows even louder, and I'm seduced by the soothing tone. Every inch of myself rejects the thought of turning down that dark corner, yet my feet carry me onward. Awaiting me in the darkness, Ari stands motionless and facing me entirely. Her hood is lowered, and her face partially exposed. She's a petite woman with curly blonde hair and deep green eyes, though something about her is very off. Like a hologram, her features seem to glitch for a few seconds at a time, morphing into the familiar face of my ex-wife, and then back into that of a stranger. In a silent confrontation, she watches me over her fingertips, her delicate hands covering the majority of her face in a shy manner.
You came to help me,
she murmurs sadly, just as the song in my mind concludes, confirming that her voice was the one singing. She pouts in a request for sympathy, and I actually feel it, regardless of not fully comprehending why. I can trace movement behind her, but I can't trust my vision because the darkness is too consuming. I have so many questions cluttering my thoughts, so many things not making any sense. Who are you? I hear my dry lips ask, and I sound as beguiled as I feel. Without warning, Ari lowers her hands from her face, and I immediately wish I had turned away. I force myself to look, but I can't force my legs to stop their trembling, nor my heart to stop its pounding. Ari's face is maimed. A hideous wound swept down from her lower brow, still bleeding. Her thin lips stretch across her face, each corner nearly touching her earlobes in a wretched, demonic grin. Her teeth are sharp and unnatural. She is not human. With such an affliction, I can't imagine how she's still able to converse. But I remind myself that I'm facing a monster. In response to the sight and my own revelation, I bring a hand up to my mouth, both in shock and to contain the rising sickness. Her lips don't move, but her voice resumes singing. I can feel myself being enticed into moving even closer. Before I take the first step forward, I look down at my phone. There's a whole bunch of missed calls from Henry, but his urgent messages are obscured by the gray chat box flickering with the red stamp announcing the word, failed. Thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe and smash that like button to get notified every time I upload a new video.